The galaxy had always seen humans as the calm ones. Ever since they joined the Intergalactic Council 300 years ago, Earth's representatives had worn smiles and suits, spoke in measured tones, and signed peace deals faster than any other species. They acted like the quiet kid in a noisy classroom, always polite, always listening, always agreeing. Most species thought humans were too soft to be dangerous, too forgiving to be feared. That illusion shattered the day the Krell Armada disappeared. No warning, no distress signal. An entire fleet, 67 capital ships, over 200,000 soldiers, and their fearsome admiral, gone without a trace. And not in some backwater system either, but near the neutral trade route between Talon 3 and the Galtari Cloud. The galaxy buzzed with theories: wormhole accident, engine malfunction, rogue asteroid swarm, pirates, even sabotage from one of the Krell's own inner circles. But there was one problem with all those guesses. There were no remains, no broken hulls, no scattered life pods, no black box transmissions, just silence where a war machine used to be. At first, nobody suspected the humans. Why would they? Earth had sent nothing more than a research vessel to that region weeks earlier. The ISS Horizon, a ship known for mapping gas anomalies and studying solar flares. No weapons, no combat protocols, just scientists and data collectors. At least that's what the Council believed. Captain Lennox stood at the helm of the Horizon as the final Krell ship disintegrated into dust, its core imploding silently under the weight of gravity bombs disguised as meteorites. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His orders were never about vengeance, never about emotion. It was strategy, calculation, patience. "That's the last one," his weapons officer, Lieutenant Reyna, said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Lennox only nodded. "Good. Pull us out. Leave no trace." They moved like ghosts, efficient, cold. Nothing about this operation screamed human. No rage, no shouting, no bloodlust, just surgical silence. The Krell had crossed a line 6 years ago, burning human colonies along the edge of Zone 12. Earth had begged the Council for justice, filed the reports, sent envoys, waited. Nothing came. Too far, too isolated, not politically significant. So humans waited. Not in silence, but in preparation. Behind every peace treaty Earth signed, behind every polite diplomatic dinner, behind every joint research project, there were plans, contingencies, coordinates. Humanity hadn't evolved past violence. They'd just learned how to wear a better mask. On the surface, Earth remained the Council's favorite model of cooperation. Its delegates spoke of harmony, its media broadcast goodwill. Children in alien academies learned about the Earth Renaissance, where the planet had risen from climate collapse into an era of progress and unity. But in secret, in the dark vacuum between stars, Earth had been building. Not bigger ships, but smarter ones. Not loud armies, but quiet teams, covert branches, black sites, artificial minds designed not to scream war, but to study it. Patterns, tendencies, historical triggers. They didn't want fast war. They wanted inevitable war. The kind you couldn't trace, the kind that looked like it never happened. Captain Lennox remembered the face of the Council speaker when Earth announced its withdrawal from the peacekeeping fleet rotation 2 years ago. Disappointment, confusion, but no protest. Earth had given too much already, they said. No one suspected why. Now, on Talon 3, reports were already flooding in. Trade routes in chaos. The Krell throne world panicked. Council emergency meetings called. And Earth was quiet. "We'll get blamed," Reyna murmured, watching the screen go dark. "No," Lennox replied. "They'll search every system, suspect every rival, chase every shadow, but not us. Not now." She glanced at him. "And later?" He didn't answer right away. just stared out into the void, where nothing remained of the Krell but vapor. "Later," he said slowly, "they'll realize what we are." The transmission logs were wiped. The ship's hull cooled back to survey temperatures. They resumed a course toward a distant solar flare, as if nothing had happened. Because that was Earth's new doctrine, not to win wars, to end them before anyone even knew a war had started. The ISS Horizon drifted calmly toward a dying star, its sensors picking up harmless solar radiation while its crew moved in silence. No celebration, no chatter, just the weight of what they'd done pressing against the steel walls like a ghost refusing to leave. Lieutenant Reyna sat alone in her quarters, a steaming cup of synth coffee untouched in her hands. The image on her datapad flickered. An old photo of her brother, Marcus, grinning with a sunburn across his nose, standing in front of the abandoned Outpost 17. That outpost had burned 6 years ago, with him inside. Krell war cruisers had swept through Zone 12 like vultures, and Earth's calls for help had fallen on deaf ears. She had memorized the names of the council members who'd voted against retaliation. Now, every one of those names had received the encrypted broadcast from the Horizon's black box. A single word on a secure channel. Balance. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a confession. It was a message, simple and terrifying. We don't forget. Meanwhile, back on the Galactic Council's capital world, Virelon Prime, the panic had begun to spread. The Krell Empire had shut down all off-world transmissions, their embassies closed, their leaders silent. The remaining Krell delegates who had survived by sheer distance, ambassadors, merchants, scholars, were either detained for questioning or fled into hiding. No empire of their size vanished without explanation. Speculation consumed the council chamber. "They were sabotaged from within," barked the Delnari representative, her tendrils twitching. "This reeks of Krell civil unrest." "No," said the Carthan delegate slowly, eyes narrowed. "This is too clean. This wasn't chaos. This was a message." Council Speaker Morat, an old Ilithian with translucent skin and eyes like melting glass, stood at the center. "We have no proof of war. No one claims responsibility. The humans say nothing. The Seldari deny involvement. Until evidence arises, we will treat this as an internal Krell matter." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Earth's ambassador, Andre Voss, sat quietly in his seat. Always calm, always composed, a glass of water before him, untouched. He didn't offer a speech. He didn't rush to reassure the room. When Speaker Morat asked if Earth had any information about the missing fleet, Andre simply said, "We mourn all lives lost in the galaxy. We encourage peace." And nothing else. Later that evening, in a private diplomatic lounge, 2 council aides spoke in hushed voices. "I don't trust them anymore," one whispered. "The humans. Something's changed." "It's not change," the other said, eyes haunted. "It's revelation. We're not seeing a new side of them. We're seeing the real one." On board the Horizon, the quiet mission continued. Captain Lennox gathered the senior officers for a closed briefing in the secured ops room. The lights dimmed, holograms flickered to life. The star map of Sector G9 expanded, marking old Earth colonies now abandoned, zones where peace treaties had been ignored, and no one had come to help. "Phase 1 is complete," he said. "Phase 2 begins next week." Reyna frowned. "You think the Council will retaliate?" "They won't even believe we did it. Not yet. That's the beauty of it." Lennox tapped a glowing dot on the map. "They'll look to the Tharn. Maybe even the Jernai. It buys us time." Another officer, Commander Holt, leaned in. "What if someone does figure it out?" Lennox didn't blink. "Then we show them why you never corner a predator pretending to be prey." The ship's AI, Athena chimed in. Incoming message from Fleet Intelligence. Top-tier encryption. Eyes only for the captain. Lennox nodded. Send it to my private console. In his quarters, the message unfolded in cold military script. Operation Mosaic green-lighted. Authorization. Omega level. Target. Council communications grid. Timeline, 3 months. Message. Peace ends when silence is mistaken for weakness. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let the weight of it all settle in. Earth had tried peace. It had tried patience. It had tried to play by the rules of the galaxy, but the galaxy never played fair. Now Earth wouldn't either. 3 months later, the galaxy was different, and no one could quite explain why. The Krell silence had spread like an infection. Their systems, once buzzing with trade and communications, remained offline. Smugglers reported deserted colonies with meals still hot on the table, patrol ships that never responded to hails, children's toys scattered in dust-covered streets, no bodies, no blood, just absence. News feeds called it the quieting. Speculation turned into fear. The council demanded answers. Investigators were dispatched, drones sent, fleets deployed. All returned with the same report. No sign of life. In the shadows, Earth moved forward with Operation Mosaic. It began with whispers, communications outages across various sectors of the Council's private comm grid. Not military, not public, but the secure infrastructure used by diplomats and high command. Nobody panicked at first. Tech glitches were common. Solar storms, malfunctions, a rogue update, perhaps. But the outages kept spreading, always skipping human systems. That was when people started to notice. In the Council's war rooms, panic set in. The comm grid wasn't just for messages. It was how planets coordinated defenses, how reinforcements were summoned, how treaties were enforced. Without it, systems were islands, and Earth had just cut the bridges. Ambassador Andre Voss still sat silent in the council chamber. Always with that soft expression, always polite. But now even the other delegates avoided eye contact with him. No one accused him directly. They didn't dare, because deep down, they knew. They'd allowed the humans to grow unnoticed. They thought Earth wanted peace out of kindness. But the truth was so much colder. Earth had wanted peace because war was inefficient. But when peace failed, back aboard the ISS Horizon, Lennox and his crew watched as another Council communications hub went dark. Athena's voice echoed through the operations center, calm as always. Phase 2. Node 6 disabled. Latency across the outer rim is now at 38%. Projected collapse of secure interstellar messaging in 11 days. Lieutenant Reyna leaned forward. The Jernai military will notice. They're not stupid. They noticed already, Lennox replied. They just haven't figured out who's behind it. And if they do? He turned to her slowly. Then we stop pretending. In orbit above Earth, the Defense Moon Atlas activated its cloaking field for the first time in a century. Built during the silent years after the Zone 12 massacres, it was Earth's insurance policy. Hidden. Armed. Entirely off record. It had weapons the galaxy hadn't even theorized. Inside its central command station, General Liao stood before a wall of screens showing galactic traffic, fleet movements, and intercepted council meetings. Everything's in place, she told her aide. If they come for us now, they come blind. The aide swallowed nervously. General, you think they'll attack? No, she said, almost too calmly. Not yet. Not while they still think there's a chance Earth will forgive them. Forgive them. That was the real fantasy. The idea that Earth could be reasoned with after being abandoned, mocked, and ignored. That humans, so fragile and polite on the surface, didn't carry long memories stitched with quiet fury. On a mining station in the Valtrax belt, a Saldari trader named Cora tried to explain the tension to her young son. "The humans," she said gently, "they're not angry like the Krell. They don't scream or threaten. They're different. They remember everything. And they wait." "Wait for what?" the child asked. She stared at the stars beyond the window, her face pale. "For the right moment, and when it comes, they strike where it hurts the most, not to show they're strong, but to make sure you never forget what they did." Across the galaxy, human colonies remained calm, markets steady, borders untouched, as if none of this chaos concerned them. But in quiet meeting rooms on Luna, deep bunkers under old Earth, and encrypted fleets spread across uncharted space, humans prepared for what came next. Not war, not peace, but reckoning. Because humanity had learned the truth long ago. In the galaxy, being feared lasts longer than being loved. The Council's fear finally gave birth to something dangerous. Desperation. 12 core species gathered in secret on the moon city of Liskar Prime. No reporters, no diplomats, no human observers. They called it an emergency stabilization session, but behind closed doors, it was far more blunt than that. "They've destabilized the grid. We can't coordinate defense routes without risking full exposure," barked the Tharn's supreme strategist, her eyes glowing red with frustration. "This isn't some tech malfunction. It's strategic, coordinated, human no proof," hissed the Carthan Chancellor. "We move without evidence. We start the very war we're trying to avoid." "It's already started," muttered the Delnari representative. "Only we're the ones still playing pretend." Arguments exploded across the room, species with centuries of distrust blaming each other, throwing theories like knives. But beneath the noise, one truth kept rising. Only the humans had nothing to lose from this chaos, and they were the only ones who weren't afraid of it. Meanwhile, on Earth, things couldn't look more peaceful. At the summit gardens of New Geneva, children played under synthetic sunlight. A drone hovered quietly, playing classical Earth music. Politicians smiled for the cameras, shaking hands over climate reforms and interstellar trade expansions. It was all a lie, but a beautiful one. Beneath New Geneva's surface, in the black glass war room of the Strategic Continuity Corps, the real decisions were being made. Dozens of analysts monitored galactic movement. Hackers ran quiet infiltration programs through Council infrastructure. Psychologists profiled alien leaders, charting emotional weaknesses and predictable reactions. And in the center of it all sat Directive Sentinel-9, a predictive warfare AI built to calculate long-term domination, not through conquest, but erosion. "Update," the AI said in its low, human-like voice. "Council cohesion dropping 12% per cycle, trust matrix at critical decay, risk of unified retaliation, negligible. Recommendation? Proceed to Phase 3. General Liao nodded. "Approved. Target?" The AI responded instantly. "Virelon Prime. Remove public confidence. Disrupt planetary gravity cores. Do not destroy. Only shake." It was cold. Surgical. No cities leveled. No deaths. Just fear. That was the point. Back aboard the ISS Horizon, Lennox received the same directive. Reyna sat beside him, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. "We're really doing this?" she asked. "Earth gave them 100 years of peace," he replied. "They spent that time ignoring us. Now we remind them who we really are." The Horizon launched a stealth drone, the size of a human child, completely undetectable to standard sensors. It slipped through Council-guarded systems like a whisper in a hurricane. When it reached Virelon Prime, it embedded itself in the maintenance ring of the planetary gravity core. One quiet pulse. Just one. The effect was instantaneous. Buildings shuddered, towers cracked, floating gardens plunged into courtyards, not enough to cause death, but just enough to remind every being on that world that something powerful and precise was watching them. Council Speaker Morat barely escaped his office, floating in zero gravity as systems tried to reboot stabilization. He clutched the wall, breathing heavily, sweat forming under his translucent skin. He didn't scream, he didn't panic, but for the first time in centuries, he felt hunted. Later, in an emergency broadcast to the galaxy, Morat addressed the event. "This was no accident. We face an invisible force, one that knows our weaknesses, and chooses not to strike fatally, but to let us fear the strike that may come next." No names were mentioned, no enemy declared, but every species watching knew. And Earth said nothing, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, didn't even look surprised. Because that was the brilliance of the new human doctrine. Don't fire the first shot. Make them believe they've already lost before you ever need to. By the time the shockwaves from Virelon Prime settled, the galaxy was no longer concerned with peace treaties or trade pacts. They were scared, not of open war, not of invasion, but of uncertainty, the kind that crept into their homes, their systems, their minds, the kind that whispered at night. What if we pushed the humans too far? Across thousands of worlds, rumors spread like rot. Fleets were grounded. Border stations doubled their patrols. Civil unrest brewed in systems once considered untouchable. And through it all, Earth said nothing. Not a broadcast, not a denial, not a single statement of reassurance. Because they didn't need to speak anymore. Their silence was the message. Back aboard the ISS Horizon, Lennox stood in the observation deck, watching the twin suns of the Araceli's system flare and pulse like warning lights. They had just completed another quiet operation, this one psychological. A relay station sabotaged to project strange, human-coded frequencies across neighboring systems. No commands, no threats. Just an old human nursery rhyme, whispered in the background static, looping endlessly. Ashes fall where silence grows. The quiet one the wise man knows. Sleep with eyes wide, never trust the light. The kindest face may strike at night. Reyna had heard it during training, years ago. Now she listened to it echo through deep space, piped into alien comms and bouncing off satellites like a haunting lullaby. It was subtle warfare, untraceable, unprovable, but utterly effective. "It's getting to them," she said, arms crossed. Even the Saldari ambassador requested protection from the Council Guard. He used to laugh at us, said Earth had soft teeth. Not anymore. "They thought we were domesticated," Lennox said. "They never realized we were just leashed." Behind them, Athena's interface flickered to life. "Incoming from command. Directive. Initiate Phase 4. Field test begins immediately." Subject, Grell 49. Reyna raised an eyebrow. "The Grell, aren't they Council allies?" "They're also Council pawns," Lennox replied. "Phase 4 isn't about power. It's about obedience. On Grell 49, life was structured, ordered, obedient to the Council in every way. So when the main atmospheric regulators failed across 3 major cities, when breathable air dropped to fatal levels for 12 minutes, just long enough to induce mass hysteria and then restore itself, panic didn't erupt. Something worse did. Doubt. No one could explain the malfunction. Council engineers denied sabotage. Council spokespeople blamed solar interference. But the Grell people weren't stupid. They had seen Earth stay quiet too long. One reporter asked the question on everyone's mind. If Earth could do this, what else have they prepared? And that was when the shift truly happened. The galaxy, once confident in its own superiority, started turning inward, against each other, against their own leaders, against the Council itself. Old grudges reawakened, borders hardened, trade froze. Earth had not fired a single missile, and they had brought the galaxy to its knees. In a hidden bunker beneath Earth's southern ice shelf, General Liao stood before the Global Strategic Committee. Around her, 12 of the most powerful humans alive sat in silence, watching the latest data scroll across black screens. Mosaic has achieved total penetration of all Council data layers, she said. 74% of member worlds are in a state of low-grade psychological destabilization. Civil cooperation is down. Resource sharing suspended. Council Unity Index at 0.11 and falling. An old man at the end of the table, his face pale and wrinkled with age, leaned forward. And how long before someone finally calls our bluff? Liao didn't flinch. They won't. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because they still think we're bluffing. A beat of silence. Then he smiled. Thin, slow, chilling. They'll learn. Outside the bunker, Earth turned slowly under its artificial shields. Quiet, untouched, innocent, just the way it wanted to look. Grell 49 never officially accused Earth. No one ever did. That was the brilliance of Earth's campaign. Everything they did happened beneath the threshold of proof. Just enough pressure to rattle a system, fracture an alliance, plant a seed of fear, but never enough to warrant open retaliation. Because Earth didn't want war, it wanted control. The kind that came when your enemies no longer trusted their own systems, when fear of shadows paralyzed action, when silence became louder than screams. Back on the ISS horizon, Captain Lennox studied the newest intelligence feed, clipped council footage showing an emergency vote on expanding war budgets, suspending cross-species travel, and demanding full inspections of Earth's technological infrastructure. But no vote passed. Too much division, too much paranoia. The council had become a room full of trembling hands, each holding a dagger, all too afraid to strike first. Reyna entered the bridge quietly. She looked exhausted. Something about this phase of the mission had worn her thinner than the others. "We're not soldiers anymore," she muttered. "We're puppeteers." Lennox didn't argue. She continued, more quietly now. "I joined to fight, to protect Earth from what they did to Zone 12. But this? Breaking their minds, piece by piece? This is the fight," he said, staring through the viewport at the pale glow of a gas giant. "They didn't hear our screams when the Krell burned our colonies. They won't hear our voices now either, but they'll feel the silence." A soft alert rang out from Athena. "Priority ping from Luna Command. Direct orders. Final trial phase. We are a go." Lennox opened the encrypted file. It was brief. "Activate Polaris Protocol. Subject, Virelon Prime. Target, atmospheric control satellites. Objective, disruption only. Visibility, high. Signature, human." That last part hit Reyna like a slap. "Visible? They want us to be seen?" Lennox nodded slowly, the meaning sinking in. "It's time." Polaris Protocol was never designed to kill. It was designed to warn. The Horizon maneuvered toward Virelon Prime's outer orbit, undetected as always. Their payload was already in place, satellite disruptors cloaked as meteor debris, set to trigger a cascading chain that would drop the planet's upper atmosphere by 6 degrees in under 12 minutes. Enough to send entire cities into chaos, enough to show them that humanity could be invisible, but chose not to be anymore. The moment the disruptors fired, the sky above Virelon turned gray, then blue, then black. A cold wind swept through government halls, schools, transit stations. Massive clouds rolled in without warning. Rain fell like ice. Air pressure dropped. Civilians collapsed in the streets from sudden oxygen shifts. For exactly 11 minutes and 42 seconds, Virelon felt helpless. And in the center of their skies, dozens of satellites blinked in synchronized red. One symbol pulsed across every screen, every comms feed, every building interface, humanity remembers. There were no denials after that. The Council convened in full emergency protocol. Every species sent fleets to high alert. Planetary shields were recharged, defense satellites repositioned. But it was already too late. Earth had done what no species had ever dared. They had ended peace not by war, but by fear. And for the first time since its formation, the Council voted not on retaliation, but on appeasement. Trade terms were adjusted in Earth's favor. Surveillance protocols against Earth systems were quietly withdrawn. Travel visas for humans were processed faster. Disputes involving Terran colonies were suddenly fast-tracked, and almost always ruled in Earth's favor. No public declarations were made, no surrender signed. But behind closed doors, everyone understood. Earth would never again be underestimated. They had been seen as peacekeepers, as diplomats, as idealists. Now they were seen as what they truly were, patient killers. Not because they struck first, but because they waited long enough to make every other species wonder if they ever should have struck at all. The shift was complete. From the outer rim colonies to the core worlds of the most ancient empires, every species now carried the same quiet fear when dealing with humans. Not the fear of war, but of misstep, of offending the wrong diplomat, of ignoring the wrong Terran petition, of assuming Earth's silence meant weakness. It was the fear of misjudging the quiet one in the room. On Virelon Prime, the skies had returned to normal, but the people hadn't. Entire blocks remained empty, businesses shut down, and military presence surged in once tranquil districts. The atmospheric anomaly had caused no fatalities, no long-term damage, but it had achieved its true purpose: humiliation. The greatest planetary capital in the galaxy had been brought to its knees, and no one had even seen the weapon. In secret, some council members demanded retaliation, others warned of escalation. But all of them, agreed on one thing: Earth could no longer be ignored. On Earth, things remained eerily calm. In a hidden facility beneath the Mojave Desert, General Liao met with the heads of Mosaic, Sentinel Command, and the Strategic Covert Response Division. The air smelled of dust and cold metal. A soft hum from cooling systems filled the silence. "Report," Liao said, standing before a polished glass table showing a live map of all active operations. "Mosaic is now active in 72 of 81 known Council-aligned systems," the Mosaic director said. "Subtle destabilization, infrastructure interruptions, trust decay, everything according to protocol." "And Polaris?" Liao asked. The head of Sentinel Command gave a satisfied nod. "Executed flawlessly. We sent the message, loud and clear." Liao stared at the table for a long moment. Then she tapped a small icon labeled S-13, Retaliatory Simulation, Council Unification Attack. "What happens if they stop fearing and start fighting?" The projection changed instantly. Fleet models, casualty estimates, planetary risk zones. The AI ran a dozen simulations in under 10 seconds. The final line on each read the same: Victory, 71%. Global devastation. Threshold, 89%. Recommendation, maintain psychological pressure, avoid open conflict. She closed the display. "Then we keep them guessing." Reyna sat alone on the observation deck of the ISS Horizon, her eyes fixed on a drifting star. Something deep in her chest ached, a cold, hollow kind of ache that no medal or mission brief could soothe. She still remembered the screaming. Not from Virelion Prime or the Krell massacre, but from her own people when no one had come to help. That's what this was really about. The missions, the precision strikes, the psychological warfare. It wasn't about dominance. It was about memory. Humanity didn't forgive, because they'd never been given the chance to forget. Lennox joined her quietly, hands behind his back. "You're thinking too loud again." Reyna didn't smile. "We've changed everything, and they still pretend to believe we're peaceful." "That's the best kind of lie," Lennox replied. "The one they tell themselves." She turned to him, finally asking the question that had haunted her for weeks. "How far are we willing to go?" Lennox didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "As far as we have to." "Not 1 inch further." A moment of silence passed between them. "Do you believe that?" she asked. He didn't lie. "No." Meanwhile, in a shadowed corner of the Council's own intelligence division, a secret meeting was underway. 4 species. No minutes, no transcripts, just fear, and a single question. What if Earth is already preparing for something bigger? There were whispers of black sites in uncharted space, rogue AI fleets, human-run listening posts that even the Council's own intelligence agency couldn't trace. Some said Earth had even infiltrated the Council's internal networks, feeding them false analytics for years. None of it could be proven. All of it was likely true. One Saldari operative leaned forward, his skin pale and clammy. They never wanted to be galactic leaders. They wanted to be galactic ghosts, and now they are. The room went quiet, because no one had a response, and across the stars, in the shadows of systems too quiet to notice, more human ships drifted unseen, watching, waiting, never striking first, never needing to. The final phase of humanity's silent war didn't come with explosions or bloodshed. There were no grand speeches or triumphant parades. No ships darkened the skies. No missiles screamed through the atmosphere. It ended the way it had begun, with silence. By the time the galaxy realized what had happened, it was already too late. The Council was no longer leading. It was following. Every vote was preceded by hushed conversations with Earth's ambassador. Every treaty reworded to favor Terran interests. Council ships began adopting Terran stealth protocols. Military academies started offering human tactical analysis as a required course. The word Peacekeeper wasn't spoken anymore. It had been replaced, without discussion, with a new term whispered in fear across the stars. Balancers. Because humans didn't bring peace. They brought equilibrium, the cold, quiet kind that sat heavy in your chest, reminding you what could happen if you misjudged them again. In the farthest corner of the Orion expanse, a small Council science team aboard the research vessel Helix Star discovered something buried beneath a frozen exoplanet, a human listening post. Abandoned but active, hidden there for over 40 years, long before Earth had even joined the Intergalactic Council. 40 years. They never reported it. Instead, they wiped the logs, turned their ship around, and headed home, never speaking of it again. Because even now, even with Earth appearing to cooperate and assist, nobody wanted to provoke the ones who'd been playing the long game since before anyone noticed they'd arrived. Back on Earth, in the heart of New Geneva, Ambassador Andre Voss stood before the United Terran Assembly, a body of leaders, generals, and thinkers who no longer needed to raise their voices to change the galaxy. The air was warm with recycled wind and the faint scent of ever-blooming trees from the genetically engineered gardens below the chamber. Voss placed his hands behind his back, calm as ever. "It's done," he said. "The Council now bends before us without a single shot fired." A low murmur of approval rippled through the room. "But," he added, letting the silence draw out, "it doesn't mean they trust us, only that they fear us. And fear fades. Eventually." General Liao spoke from her seat near the front. "Then we keep it alive. Quietly. Carefully." A younger diplomat leaned forward, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. "What if someone calls our bluff?" Voss turned his gaze on him slowly. "Then it's no longer a bluff. And that was the unspoken core of the new Terran doctrine. For centuries, the galaxy believed humanity to be fragile, kind, slow to anger, a peace-seeking race that wore its ideals on its sleeves. But humans had evolved far beyond the brute force tactics of early war. They'd learned the art of restraint and how to use it like a weapon. They didn't destroy planets, they destroyed confidence. They didn't cripple fleets, they crippled unity, and they never needed to shout. Because their silence now spoke louder than any declaration of war ever could. On the ISS horizon, Lennox stood alone on the bridge, the stars reflected in the glass before him. The crew had gone silent after the last message from command. Phase 4 was now permanent policy. Mosaic would continue operating, not as a mission, but as a doctrine. Humanity wasn't at war anymore. It was the war. Reyna entered, her boots soft against the steel floor. She looked at him with a strange, tired smile. "So this is it," she said. "The end of the long game." Lennox nodded. "And the start of a longer one." She walked beside him, staring out at the dark. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" He didn't answer, because forgiveness wasn't the point. She asked again, softer this time. "Do we even care anymore?" That one he answered. "No." She sighed, then whispered, "I think that's the part that scares me." He didn't argue. It scared him too, but he knew what fear was now. It was power. And Earth, for the first time in its long and battered history, was no longer the frightened species in the corner of the galaxy. Now they were the ones who watched, the ones who planned, the ones who waited, and when needed, the ones who reminded the stars that the quietest species, the one that called itself civilized, soft-spoken, diplomatic, was also the most dangerous. Not because of rage, but because of patience, because humanity could wait decades for justice, centuries for revenge, and if peace was refused long enough, they would build a silence so heavy, so absolute, that the galaxy itself would shiver under its weight. So when historians, decades from now, asked when exactly Earth rose to power, when the turning point came, it wouldn't be the Krell War, or the Council debates, or even the blackout over Virelon Prime. Number it would be the day the galaxy saw humans not as peacekeepers, but as patient killers, and never dared to look at them the same way again.